I found my light. With Jesus by my side, I conquer every fight. Walking in faith, I won't be afraid. His love surrounds me, my fears will fade. Hope is my anchor, love is my guide. With Jesus I'll overcome, I'll never hide. A warrior of strength, in His name I rise. In a world of chaos, His love never dies.
She's an award-winning author, speaker, owner of GodlyGranny.com, and podcast host, sharing the truth with you. This is The Michelle Moore Show.
Hi, everyone. So glad that you're with us. We have a great show planned for you today. It's not necessarily the best of news, but I think it's important that we're all aware of what is going on and right here in our own country. So we've got Cindy Jenkins with us today. Her daughter passed away in the state of Florida. She was at a red light, gets rear-ended, goes into the hospital, and we're going to hear about all the details of what happened to her in the hospital and what led to her passing away and never leaving the doors of the hospital. But first, I want you to see the video that I saw on Instagram where Cindy, the mama, is talking about Taylor and what is going on in the state of Florida. So let's look at that before we bring Cindy in. So let's take a look.
If you've never heard of Florida's free kill law, chances are the people you know have never heard of it either. I learned about it when I was sucked into a reality I didn't even know existed a few years ago. It's a reality I never asked to become a part of. It's a nightmare you cannot wake up from. My daughter was rear-ended at a red light. She was rushed to the closest hospital where she was the victim of confirmed reckless medical negligence and neglect. I paid for a private autopsy that forced the medical examiner to change the cause of death on her death certificate because the cause the hospital sent did not exist. And I also have a sworn affidavit from a well-credentialed physician that outlines the reckless negligence and neglect that cost her life. When I set out on a mission to hold the hospital and doctors accountable to make sure that they could never rip another family apart through such reckless negligence ever again, and also because I wanted to hear them answer for how it could have even happened, I was asked the same 3 questions by attorneys. How old was Taylor? And I would say she'd just turned 25 years old. Was Taylor married? No, she has a boyfriend and they're going to get engaged, but she's not married yet. Did Taylor have children? No, Taylor did not have children. And that's when I learned that in the state of Florida, if you are 25 or older, you're not married, and you don't have children under 25, you are what's considered a Florida free kill.
Okay, a Florida free kill. I think about how all life is valuable and precious. And this is the way they're treating those that are 25 or older with no children and not married. This is what's going on. So, or no minor children. Let's go on ahead and bring Cindy in. Cindy Jenkins, she's started an organization. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But Cindy, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to show everyone a photo of Taylor, your daughter. She was a beautiful young lady. Look at her. Tell us about her.
So Taylor was a ray of sunlight. It was just such a blessing to be her mom for 25 years on this planet. She was as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside. Very gifted. She was smarter than me by first grade when they identified her as gifted, but also just had a zest for life, could make anything fun, and just an overall amazing human. And she was living her best life. She had just turned 25 years old when this happened. She was living her best life. She loved her career. She graduated college at 20 years old with a degree in finance and called me up. I've been a 100% single mom almost all of my 2 daughters' lives. And she called me up and said, "Mom, I know you worked really hard to put me through college, but I don't think I want to go get a desk job right away. I'm still young. I think I want to get a job as a flight attendant and travel the world." And in usual Taylor style, she set her mind to something and went and accomplished it. And she became a flight attendant. She had intended to only do it for about a year. She was going to do a gap year because she had earned a scholarship to pay for half of her master's degree. But she said, "I'm just going to put that on hold and go travel." And I'm so thankful that she did. She loved it so much. She continued to do that for several years. And it was at the airline that she was with that she met the love of her life, Brett, who I fully approved of, and still just love him and his family. So her life was on a high note in every single way. She had the career she loved. She'd met a wonderful human being. They were planning their entire future together. And then it all just came crashing down. And our family and Americans who pay health insurance premiums and taxes are the only ones who have paid the consequences for this.
All right. So let's talk about what happened. So she's in the car, she's at a stop, and what happens?
So it was St. Patrick's Day evening, and Taylor had no plans to go out. She was going to fly next day to Dallas, Texas, because she'd helped a friend get a job with Southwest, and she was going to fly down there and pin her good friend's wings on. But her friends, I mean, everyone loved Taylor. She was just so fun to be around. And her friends talked her into coming out to a little Irish pub on St. Patrick's evening. She went there. She cut out early because she needed to get home to get to bed. And she was talking with Brett on the phone. And she said, "Hey, let me call you back in a few. I'm going to swing through Taco Bell and get a spicy beef burrito." It was her favorite thing. And the last word she ever heard was, "I loved you. I love you." She pulled up to a red light and she was stopped. And she was rear-ended by another driver. And the Florida Highway Patrol happened to just roll right up on the accident. They didn't have to get called. They happened to be right on that path. So they drove up on the accident. They sprung into action, and Taylor was delivered to the closest hospital in record time. And that's where everything just became a train wreck.
Okay. So she's at the hospital. How quickly is it before they start asking if she's married or has any minor children?
So I do not know. I still can't get her full record from the hospital, but I was able to get an attorney to get enough of it for me. I've had to pay for this out of pocket because you can't get any help in Florida. But essentially how I learned she was even in the hospital is I woke up on March 18th, and I'm an early riser. So it was a Saturday, but it was right around 6 a.m. And I just started scrolling my phone, checking text messages and whatnot. And I'll never forget how I felt. Like I said, I'd been 100% single mom of my 2 girls most of their lives. I used to be a teacher. I would sometimes teach at brick and mortar during the day, teach virtually in the evening, to do just whatever I could to try to have their same schedule and be 2 parents in one, but also provide for them financially. And then eventually that led me to go into real estate, which became a great career and provided such great opportunities for my girls. So I'm laying there literally relishing in the fact. I just, for whatever reason, woke up feeling such overwhelming gratitude for where we were. I was like, wow, Taylor has met this and they've been together for about a year, but she's met someone that I feel really good about being the father of my future grandchildren, and, us combining families. And then her little sister, Madison, was in her senior year of college at Taylor's alma mater, which is University of South Florida. She was just loving it, doing a great job, living the sorority life. And I felt so thankful and blessed that I was able to help them get to this point. I mean, I was blessed with great children. They couldn't make being a single mom any easier, but I'm just feeling, my heart was overflowing with gratitude for, wow, like the hard part is behind me. And now I get to just sit back and help plan weddings and have all the fun times and welcome grandchildren. And I kid you not, I start getting a call from an unknown number on my phone as I'm just scrolling and feeling all this gratitude. And the number, and I would let it go to voicemail because of my profession. I get a ton of people trying to sell me stuff.
Yeah.
So I keep rolling it to voicemail, and I think this is a really persistent salesperson. I cannot believe that they just keep calling me over and over from this unknown number. And I just wouldn't I wouldn't answer it. But then a number started coming through, like from a number I didn't recognize immediately. And I thought, well, maybe I should answer this. So I answered it, and this is where there's this quote that says, there's the life there's before this and after this. And there's a moment, your life will never be the same. And this is when that moment began. Yeah. So I answer it. I say, hello. And it's a officer from the Florida Highway Patrol. And he says, I'm so glad you answered. I'm Officer so-and-so with the Florida Highway Patrol. I'm a dad, and I've stayed after my shift to track you down because I wanted to let you know that your daughter, Taylor, has been in an accident and she's out of hospital here in Orlando. I have family members and friends in healthcare. My girls and I have always been so blessed. We just have been incredibly blessed to only really need like an antibiotic here and there for a sinus infection or strep throat. But I knew enough from the horror stories I had heard from people in healthcare to never go near a certain hospital corporation. And so the first question I asked when he said she was in the hospital was, which hospital? And he said the name of it, and I started Googling it, and I realized it was this facility. So I got some more details, finished up my call with him, and the first call I made was to my aunt, who's a retired ICU critical care nurse. And I lost it. I said, oh my gosh, Aunt Susan, Taylor's been rear-ended and they took her there. This is not going to end well. And she said, Cindy, there are good doctors and bad doctors everywhere. We just have to pray she gets one of the good ones. So she said, let me see if I can get any information from the hospital. She started calling them. I started packing, gosh, talk about fight or flight. I just started packing my bag and knew I needed to get from Jacksonville, Florida to Orlando as quickly as possible. If there's one thing my girls have always known, it is that their mom would have their back no matter what. And I knew I needed to be there with her. So my aunt calls me back and she says, it sounds really serious. They said that they've just been trying to stabilize her blood pressure all morning. I'm just trying to get some more of the details, but right now they're just saying they've just been trying to stabilize her and her blood pressure all morning. So I get to Orlando finally. Thank goodness for my best friend because I hyperventilated with her on the phone the whole drive. And she was calming me down, and I got there and I go into the building, I check in, and I go up to the floor that she's on, let them know who I am, and they tell me that I need to go wait in the waiting room. And it's a very detailed story, but I'm in the waiting room. I have no idea what's going on, what's happened so far. I've not really gotten anything other than my aunt telling me they couldn't stabilize her blood pressure. So I'm sitting there in a room. It's a waiting room with a couple of broken vending machines and other families. And in storms this guy, and somehow he identifies me as the mom of Taylor. And he walks up to me, and his behavior, it was the first thing that my mom gut knew something was not right. Red flags were flying everywhere. But he walks up to me and he says, your daughter was in an accident. Her brain is very swollen. Poof, there's no room. And she's probably not going to live. And if she does, she will never be the daughter you had before the accident. And then he reaches down, grabs my hand, shakes it, and storms out. And everyone in that waiting room is looking at me like, what just happened? So they start consoling me. They start telling me about the horrific accidents their loved ones were in and how they're doing okay. One of them said, my daughter was rear-ended at 70 miles an hour on I-4 at the Disney exit. It threw her car into oncoming traffic. The airbags had already deployed. And she was in a coma for 7 days, but she's awake. We don't know why he's telling you what he's telling you. It was just so bizarre that it wasn't adding up for anybody. So
you're left in the waiting room at this point. How long are you in the waiting room before you finally have someone else come to see you, or you get to go and see her? What happens next?
Yeah, so I'm in the waiting room. It felt like an eternity. I didn't even know what really to do.
And they're not letting you see her?
Well, they're having me sit out in the waiting room. Now that I know what really happened, I see why they had me waiting there and they needed some time. The other thing too is one of my undergrad degrees is in special education. So I've studied the brain extensively, and they'd mentioned subdural hematomas. So that's a pocket of blood that forms between your brain and your skull, inside your skull, and puts massive pressure. It's a very serious brain injury. It usually does cause severe brain damage, but it requires immediate surgery. So I'm just thinking, if there's no room, has she already been to surgery? Is she already out? Like, I don't know, because it happened so quick and then he just took off. It wasn't like you see on TV where they sit you down in a room and they're showing you scans and explaining everything. And by the way, that was the neurosurgeon. And that was the only time I saw him for the 5 full days my daughter was in that facility. So I'm sitting there. Finally, a nurse comes in and she says, you can come back to the room now. And I go back to the room that Taylor's in, and she's heavily sedated. They had her on fentanyl and propofol and just very, very heavily sedated, which is crazy because they kept telling me that since she's been unconscious for 6 hours because of this brain injury, it's not looking good. Her record shows they had her heavily sedated from right after she got to the hospital. The doctor who read her record said, you could walk in there healthy, and if they sedated us like that, we wouldn't be conscious either. So I didn't know, but I just knew that I had gotten no real information from the neurosurgeon. And then a trauma doctor, a fellow that was overseeing her care, comes into the room. He would not look at me. He would look everywhere but at me and my face. And he just said, yeah, this brain injury is really serious. And I'm saying, I've already seen her. I'm like, clearly she's not been to surgery. Are you going to take her to surgery? And he's looking everywhere but at me. And he's like, oh no, it doesn't work in these cases. And I'm like, what do you mean it doesn't work in these cases? He's like, yeah, her brain is really swollen and we just have to write it out and see if the swelling comes down, because if it doesn't, it's not looking good. We think it'll swell to the point that her brainstem will herniate into her spinal column, and that will cause brain death. And so then my next question as a mom is, if you think her brain is swelling to that point, have you had her back to imaging? Can you get her back to some imaging? Because she'd only had one set of imaging right after arrival, and see what's going on. And he says, no, it wouldn't change our course of treatment. So we're not going to do any imaging. And right then I just knew my mission needed to become to get my child out of that hospital. Whatever it took, I needed to get her out. I didn't know that she was being heavily sedated with propofol and fentanyl and all this stuff. So I was trying to be really mindful of the fact that I didn't know what Taylor could hear. I didn't want her, hearing things and not understanding what's going on.
Sure.
So I had to leave the room a lot. I had to go spend a lot of time in the neurotrauma ICU room or in the hallways. And I'm out of the room often because I'm trying to call my aunt and say, can you call Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville and see if we can get her transferred there? We'd researched and found that the top trauma hospital, that's a level 1 trauma hospital in Orlando, is Orlando Regional. And so I said, well, let's try these two. These look like our 2 best options. So Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville said, we will not take an incoming transfer patient from Orlando that's trauma. That left only Orlando Regional. So my aunt starts making some calls and she says, try to see if you can get access to her record. Have them just give you her portal or whatever, because we need to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And they start denying me access to my daughter's record. It is a Florida state statute. I wasn't asking for official copies that are printed out, which they have up to 30 days to provide. I just said, I want to see her medical record. Do you have a portal? That same doctor's like, oh, we don't have that for patients on this floor. Like, not looking at me, telling me they don't have a portal. I actually looped in, this went on for 2 full days, by the way, me trying to see her record so that I could let someone at Orlando Regional know what it said and make sure she was safe to transfer. I'm telling them I want to have her transferred out of here. And they were looking at me like I didn't even speak English. It was the most bizarre thing. It was, there's someone you've had on your show that does a hospital hostage hotline.
Yeah.
And
Laura.
to the high heavens, I had known about that at that time. It was me against this $110 billion hospital corporation. I'm nothing to them. And my child is laying there clinging to life. And I'm just trying to get her the adequate care because it seems like they're doing absolutely none of the right things. And it was futile. It was just futile.
So
and I wish I'd had that
she's
number.
there but she's there for 5 years. I mean, 5 days.
5 days.
So she's there for 5 days. Do they ever take her back to imaging again and do any kind of procedure to give her any kind of relief?
So they took her back to imaging, but what they told me the imaging showed, it was 8 hours after the first set of imaging that she was taken for the second set. And now I'll go ahead and tell you what really happened, and you'll understand why they were behaving the way that they were. She's there for 5 full days. We're all led to believe that she has this brain injury, and we're just going to watch and wait and hope her brain swelling comes down. So we're looking at the brain monitor. We're praying, like we're trying to be quiet and just do everything we can to help the situation. And then later that week, as I'm still trying to get her transferred out, I looped in an Orlando attorney. I actually went to the charge nurse. I called the charge nurse and I said, I have an attorney. I need to arrange a meeting with you and whoever at this hospital can make the decision to let me see my child's medical record and get her transferred out of here. And so she said, let me call admin. I will call you back in an hour. And an hour comes and goes, and she never calls me. So I call the number I'd called previously, and I said, I need to speak to this nurse. And they said, oh, she's gone home for the day. She had no intent of ever scheduling that meeting. What people think goes on in hospitals and what really goes on are two different things. It is not like what you see on TV by any stretch. No. So she's gone for the day. The attorney is dumbfounded, and he actually said, I am so sorry she ended up there. We have to sue that hospital all the time. It's a really dangerous place for people to end up. He says, I'll do what I can to help you if you can get the right people that can make the decisions. Well, then all of a sudden, the doctors start telling anyone, because Taylor had people flood in from all over the place. These staff didn't know who her family and friends were from Adam. And they're just, I mean, they walked in one time to one of her friends to tell her something. And she's like, I am also Taylor's age. I'm not her mom. Would you like for me to get her mom? Why are you sharing this information with me? They were trying to have her friends sign consent for stuff. It was crazy. But then they start telling anyone, they don't know who these people are, but I have people start calling me and texting me saying, they're telling us they're going to start brain death testing Taylor, and they don't need your permission to do it. And as long as 2 physicians agree, they'll start discontinuing life support. And so I'm trying to loop the attorney in to get that longer. Because again, I don't know what's really happened. I don't know if maybe if I get her to a hospital that can do brain surgery, if that's going to help. All I know is it seems like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. There's residents constantly floating through the room. One doesn't know what the other one said. I mean, it was just a complete contradictory mess the entire time. And even her friends are begging me, Miss Jenkins, please get her out of here. Please get Taylor transferred somewhere else. And I said, I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can. Well, as the days go on. I
understand though, Cindy. So you can't get her transferred because the hospital that would be receiving her has questions about her current state. And you can't really get answers about the current state because you can't see the medical records. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. And also the hospital. So I'm showing them the statute because there's a Florida state statute that says you have the right, it's a law, to be transferred from one public Florida hospital to another one. And because Taylor was, I know now heavily sedated, but because she was unconscious, I am her healthcare surrogate. In Florida, your next of kin automatically becomes your healthcare surrogate.
Sure.
So I'm now making decisions as if I'm her. And they just had an agenda and they were full steam ahead with their agenda and nobody was going to get in their way and stop what their agenda was. So I'm showing them the statute on my phone and they're just looking at me like I'm crazy. Like, you know.
Mm-hmm, that he didn't care. And quite frankly, they knew. You know, they know what the laws are. You're not telling them anything new. And so they're ignoring your rights and your requests and your attorney's requests. And so you're getting nowhere. And so you said that they took her down 8 hours after the first. So let's go back to that. I was curious. So what did happen? You know, you said you were going to tell us what really happened when they supposedly took her down to get some imaging.
Well, I'll tell you what really happened after I learned of it, which was after the fact. But when they finally did some subsequent imaging, they only did 2 sets the entire time, the initial and then the subsequent. or they had already, I can't remember. I have to look at what time I got there or what time they'd done the imaging, but second imaging was done. And then they're telling me, oh yeah, this imaging, her brain is so swollen and we just don't think she's going to pull through this. You know, she's young, she's fit, she's healthy. We'll see what happens. We'll give her a little more time. But then the days go by. I can't ever see her record. I can't get her transferred. They're actually supposed to help initiate a transfer and make sure that another hospital will accept her. They don't do any of that. They then are telling me they have to start this brain death testing with or without me, and that as long as two physicians agree, they will discontinue life support. At this point, I'm a fighter, Michelle. I'm a fighter. And I have fought with everything in me because at the same time, her little sister is here and I'm watching her world fall apart. I mean, I'm here fighting all of this on my own. Yeah. One of my daughters is clinging to life. Nothing seems to be adding up. And I'm watching the other one and her life just fall apart in front of her. It was a lot. So finally we get to March 22nd and they tell me that they've done some testing, like a brain flow test and one other test, and that she did not have any brain activity. And now they need to pull her off of life support, and two doctors back to back would see if she spontaneously breathes when they pump her IV full of carbon dioxide to see. They're like, we're going to pump her so full of it that if there is any life in her, it would cause her to gasp for air. So I'm in the room when all of this is happening. She has no signs of life whatsoever. They call her death at 5:35 p.m. They say she's dead. And then I just knew that I had to figure out what really happened because nothing was adding up. So when I set out on a mission after I left the hospital, I mean, they've ruined my life. My girls and I, it's just been the three of us. And we've always been so close. People refer to us as a unit. You've just ripped 1/3 of my family out of my life. And it seemed like you weren't even doing the bare minimum to try to help her. So I said, I can't change the fact that Taylor is gone. And I will never, ever, ever in this lifetime understand why this was part of the plan. But I will make sure that they can never do it to another family again. I'm going to figure out what they did, and I'm going to make sure that it can never happen again. So this was such a twist of fate. I called the medical examiner because I'd already gone through the record with my aunt at that point, and we're starting to see all this bleeding that was happening internally in her abdomen. To backtrack, on day one, they came storming us at 5:35 p.m. and they did say she was bleeding internally. Like, they hadn't really shared this all day. And they said turns out she's bleeding internally. And if we don't rush her to surgery, she's going to die. But even if we rush her to surgery, it's still not looking good because of the brain injury. So I knew she had had surgery. They come out and they say that went incredibly well. It was a torn pelvic artery from the seatbelt. The surgery went incredibly well. And so we're still thinking, all of our focus is still on why did they not operate or do something to help this brain injury that she had? So the medical examiner released her death certificate and his death summary, and it said subdural hematomas and a midline shift. But the bleeding wasn't on there. So that was my first thing. I'm like, okay, but sir, she was bleeding internally and that's not listed as a cause of death, but it looks like that is actually what caused her to die. And in the meantime, they weren't really doing anything for the brain injury. And he said, when someone dies in a Florida hospital, their body is sent to the medical examiner. My role is to do an external examination and look at what the hospital has sent me. And I've done what's in my scope, Ms. Jenkins. But I said, okay, can you at least document that she did not have any type of surgery for this brain injury, that she didn't have a craniotomy or anything? And he said, I've done what's in my scope. And that one thing is what caused me to send her for autopsy. I said, then I'm going to have to send her for autopsy so I can have a pathologist document that they did no intervention to try to stop all this brain swelling and remove these subdural hematomas listed as her cause of death. This is listed as her cause of death, and the standard of care for subdural hematomas with a 7 millimeter midline shift is immediate surgery to get that out of there. So there is room for brain swelling. So I send her for autopsy, and the autopsy report comes back. There are no subdural hematomas. The medical examiner was forced to change Taylor's cause of death to a torn pelvic artery. What happened was she sustained the torn pelvic artery on the scene. Her vitals on the EMS initial report on scene when they showed up show that she was tachycardic. Her heart rate was super fast because when you have an internal bleed, your heart starts pumping faster to try to get blood flowing through your veins to compensate for the blood being lost. So she's tachycardic. Her heart rate is really fast. What happens next in somebody who's going into hemorrhagic shock is their heart rate will then tank because their body can't compensate forever. So by the time she gets to the hospital, the ER has 2 sets of EMS records that show glaring signs of internal bleeding. Her heart rate on scene was through the roof. By the time we've just gotten here within 15, 20 minutes, it's now tanked. They did nothing. When they sent her to first CT imaging, they did a full body CT imaging. The head brain CT said she had subdural hematomas and a midline shift, and it clearly said excessive motion limits this evaluation. They did no follow-up imaging to try to figure out, is this an accurate CT scan? Was this hard to read because of movement? Mm-hmm. The pelvic CT scan upon arrival said there was traces of fluid in her abdomen and pelvic area. So now you have glaring signs of internal bleeding in her vitals, and you have a pelvic CT scan saying that there's free-form fluid in her pelvic and abdomen area. They do nothing.
Okay.
They ended up sticking her up into the ICU, where she laid for 8 hours. They did call the neurosurgeon though. So this is really important because when I share what the Florida Department of Health done, people need to know how serious what they did is. When the CT scan came out, I guess they just decided, oh yeah, she has this brain injury. So they phone consulted the on-call neurosurgeon, who per Florida Department of Health guidelines for a level 2 trauma center is to be on site for a bedside critical care evaluation within 30 minutes. Remember when I said they made me wait in the waiting room? The neurosurgeon had just shown up over 7 hours after getting the consult. So for that whole time where they don't realize this brain injury is not present, the ER doctor and the trauma doctor are not making sure my daughter is getting proper neurological care. She's laying there bleeding internally from a torn artery for 8 hours. It seems, and this is just my best guess, it seems like when the neurologist showed up, he realized that she had been bleeding internally. He was the one that was like, what have you all done? So when they rush her for that second set of CT scanning, right after he showed up, the CT scan shows there's no subdural hematomas. She, at that point, had massive hypoxic brain damage from blood and oxygen not reaching her brain. By this point, she does have a hematoma, a pocket of blood, and it's in her abdomen and in her left quadricep. So the radiologist notifies the trauma doctor, your patient is bleeding internally. The standard of care for this is get them to the OR yesterday and stop the bleeding. Mm-hmm. This fellow responsible for her care, who now knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that she is bleeding internally, leaves my child laying there for 7 more hours, bleeding to death, while he administers mass transfusion protocol in the incorrect ratio. He was pumping her full of red blood cells. The doctor who read her record said that was like pumping Taylor full of water. He was not putting in the appropriate ratio of platelets or plasma so that her blood could clot. And he said, and any clotting that had taken place at the tear would have just been flushed out. So now she's going to bleed more rapidly. It's going to worsen her condition. The radiologist also notified him that he had installed the central line wrong. A central line is like an IV for patients who may need to go to surgery. It's pretty much standard protocol for any trauma patient. He notifies this doctor that he has inserted it wrong, that it's not properly positioned, and he recommends that he reposition it, and he never repositioned it. So all of this is going on, and we're all thinking she's laying there and has this brain injury that they're not operating on. Had I not gotten the autopsy, Michelle, I would have never known the full truth. I would have just spent the rest of my life thinking they let my child lay there and die from a brain injury. The medical examiner changed her cause of death, by the way. He removed any type of brain injury whatsoever, and the only cause of death is the torn artery.
Okay. Is it just complete incompetence, or just what in the world at this point, looking back and what you know now, I mean, what is it that you think happened? Are they just completely incompetent? Was it negligence? What is it exactly?
So what I've learned over the last 3 years while this has consumed my life is that healthcare has truly become a system. And I don't care if it's for-profit healthcare or not-for-profit. For-profit is for-profit, not-for-profit is for revenue. And we have all just become a means to an end for this system that plugs in doctors, plugs in nurses, and then it's literally a money-making mill. And you really do have to pray for the best, because the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing in a lot of cases. This particular $110 billion hospital corporation, they have a reputation for placing profits over patients. They have a reputation, and their own staff have picketed in front of their various facilities for underpaying people, intentionally understaffing. Like, they will intentionally understaff to add money to their bottom line, and they'll also hire the least qualified staff. I find it hard to believe that the fellow that was responsible for her care didn't know the signs of internal bleeding, but all things point to that. I mean, there's just, everyone who's looked at it has said it's criminal. Every medical professional, because multiple now have volunteered to look through a record, and they're like, they don't even understand how it happened, but they're like, when he knew she was bleeding and that 7-hour time period lapse, that's criminal. You can't let a patient lay before you and bleed for 7 hours. It's not going to end well.
All right. So Cindy, at what point does the Florida kill law come up, and you realize that there's no recourse that you have for the hospital or these doctors? Mm-hmm. How does all of that come up and come into effect?
So the autopsy report comes back, and I'm looking over it. I have other medical professionals looking over it. We realize that my daughter's cause of death doesn't exist, and that the hospital knew that by the second CT scan, and they really should have redone the first one. When excessive motion limits your evaluation, you don't just run with what you think it is, you do more imaging. Mm-hmm. So I realize I have to hold these doctors accountable. This was a train wreck. This brain injury doesn't exist. They sent a cause of death they knew didn't exist to the medical examiner. Had I not paid for an autopsy, I would have never known. Like, how many people are leaving a hospital not really knowing what happened to their loved one? And I want to interject, if you ever lose a loved one in the hospital, please do whatever you can to pay for an autopsy. I know it's not cheap, but please pay for one, because you may never know the truth if you don't. When the truth came to light, that's when I said, I want to hear from these people. How did you do this to my child? What was going on? Why did you let her lay there for 7 hours bleeding internally while administering mass transfusion protocol wrong, and you never even moved the central line that you put in wrong? I wanted to hear them answer. So I start reaching out. I was researching law firms around the state of Florida, trying to pick the best ones. And I just started calling, and I'm telling them, this is proven already. I'm telling them what they did, and they would listen, but then they'd have 3 questions, and they'd say, okay, how old was Taylor? And I would say, she's just turned 25 years old. Was Taylor married? No, she was about to get engaged. She met the love of her life, but she wasn't married yet. I'm like wondering why they're asking me these questions. I had no idea. And then the last thing they would ask, with a sound of defeat in their voice, was, did Taylor have children? And I'd say, no, she didn't have children. And then that's when they would say, and that was the last picture my girls and I ever took together, by the way. Taylor had just moved to a different place in Orlando where she was based. Madison and I were going to meet up in Orlando because she had a little break from school. And we said to Taylor, hey, come on over to Disney Springs and meet up with us. She was actually busy moving, but she first said no. And then she said, you know what? I'll do it. I'll come over. I want to hang out with you in Madison. And so that was the 2 weeks before the accident. It was the last time the three of us were ever together. So I'm calling law firms. I'm thinking, I mean, I'm a business owner now, and I know you were a business owner, and like in real estate, I'm not going to take something I feel like I can't handle. Like I'll do some commercial, but if I'm going to have to go in and do inventory, I'm not going to do certain things. I want them to have the best care necessary. There's some things like I don't do rentals, right? So I'm thinking they just must not want to help me because it doesn't fit their business model. I need to call some other attorneys. Every single attorney you call will ask those three questions. And I've had so much pushback on social media. They're like, there's no way that that's true. And I encourage anyone who thinks this is not true, start calling law firms in Florida and just say, I believe my loved one was the victim of wrongful death because of medical malpractice, and see what the first things they ask you are. They're going to say, how old were they? Were they married? Did they have children? And when you say 25 or older, unmarried, no minor children, they're going to tell you they cannot help you.
All right. So when does somebody finally tell you about the free kill law?
It was one of the it was actually the law firm that had tried to help me get her transferred. And they were a little more transparent about it. And they're like, we have this law. And, they just won't let us help victims. What they do to families like yours is they say that you can get economic damages. So you can get the cost of the funeral expenses, or you can get the cost of the autopsy. And what that does, by limiting you only to economic damages and barring you from non-economic damages, deceased people have very little economic damages. The law is by design. Essentially, the economic damages are here. The cost to get these people into a courtroom and hear them answer for what they've done is here.
Sure.
And this is the loss that all the law firms around Florida would take if they tried to help a family. So even the governor said, oh, you can sue for economic damages. It is a way to try to dupe the general population into believing we have recourse. That's the other big pushback I get. Oh no, I looked it up. It says you can get economic damages. Economic damages are here. The cost to go after them is here. Nobody's going to spend all that money and lose money so that you can recover the cost of your funeral expense or your autopsy. And what that does is mean you are intentionally stripped of your fundamental rights under the United States Constitution to equal protection under the law, because they're carving out a group of people and saying, no, your life is valued differently because you weren't married and you didn't have minor children. So they're stripping away equal protection under the law. Due process, a lot of families cannot get their medical records at all. I don't have all of hers. I have enough of it that we determined what went down. I don't think they want to provide stuff that would incriminate them on an even greater level. So I'm still going to keep asking. I was about to send that today to say, this is the umpteenth request for this set of records that you've not sent me. So no equal protection under the law, no due process where you can actually get the medical record and figure out what really happened to your loved one. And the doors to the court are slammed in your face because they make access to justice look like an illusion by saying, oh, you can get economic damages. But what they don't tell people is, again, that's here. The cost to actually pursue this is here, and nobody's going to fill that gap. That's a lot of money that they'd have to spend.
So what that in effect then does is keeps the hospitals and the doctors from being held accountable for the negligence and malpractice and all of that.
And this is what Americans need to understand. This is not just a Florida problem. When you strategically block access to justice, you're also strategically blocking the medical negligence judgment that would tell the hospital, you will reimburse the health insurance company or Medicare or Medicaid because you're not going to get a payday for a wrongful death. Well, this law blocks access to the courts very strategically, which also then blocks access to that medical malpractice judgment. So not only do the doctors get a free pass and get to continue to practice like it never happened, not only do they profit from it. Their insurance companies dodge claims. I mean, it is a big money grab for those responsible. And the only ones left to pay for the consequences are the victims who lose their lives and the families who have a gaping hole because of those actions.
Okay. All right. It's insane. Are you aware of any other states that has a law that is like the free kill law that Florida has?
Florida is the only state with a free kill law that carves out a group of people based on their age, marital status, and family status, and says you are only entitled to economic damages. Now, I have learned that 26 other states have what's called damage caps on non-economic damages. So these families can go after the economic damages, but they are capped on the non-economic. The non-economic are not things that you can tabulate, right? So if there was a baby in Florida that was born and the nurse didn't realize she was cutting off the baby's circulation and the baby lost her pinky, and her mom is like a fantastic piano player. She'd always look forward to, I'm going to teach my daughter how to play piano when we have this baby. She's going to grow up and carry on this legacy of playing the piano. Well, she lost her pinky because the circulation was cut off, right? Here's where damage caps protect profits, but not people. That's horrible. Nobody wants their baby to lose a pinky. But there's a gentleman a little further south of Jacksonville who the hospital did not act on all the signs of sepsis, and the man has no arms or legs now. He is a body with a head. He lost his marriage. His whole life has been turned upside down. Did he get a big settlement? Yes, he needs a lot of care for the rest of his life, and you can't tabulate. There's no cost to the impact having no limbs is going to have on your life. So where I'm going with this is medical malpractice is not one size fits all. No doctor says, hey, I want to give you the opportunity to limit the harm that I can do to you, right? Like the harm is the harm, but there's 26 states, and Florida used to be one of these states, there used to be 27, that will say it doesn't matter what the doctor does, how horrific the harm is, or what the impact of that harm is to your life. Everyone's capped at $500,000. Now, different states have different amounts, but I am sorry, Michelle, maybe someone would be willing to give up a pinky for $500,000 outside of the cost of medical care. Like, this is what we're going to compensate you for the damage we've done to your life. But I don't know anyone that's going to give up 4 limbs for $500,000. And that's what they do. They don't care what they've done to you. Everyone's capped at the same amount. Caps were declared unconstitutional twice in Florida because after empirical studies, very extensive empirical studies, it was determined that they did nothing but harm victims while protecting insurance company and hospital profits.
Yeah, profits.
Caps do, Michelle, is because I've called attorneys in other states, I've been trying to figure out how to get rid of this law. And the legislature, the key legislators who are very loyal to the powerful lobbies, they all want these caps back in Florida. And so I looked into it. I said, let me see if this is a viable option. And I quickly learned that the caps are a way in other states so that only those most harmed with the highest economic damages can get help. Essentially, there's a lot of families in other states that if the victim died and they're capped here on the like Florida caps you at 0, like you're not getting anything. But unless you have a victim that survived and they're going to have massive ongoing economic expenses like medical bills and long-term care, the things that you can calculate and write down, because they're capping the other damages. There's a lot of families in 26 other states reaching out to me all the time now saying, this happened to my loved one. The only thing worse than Taylor being in heaven right now would have been had she survived and been a vegetable 24/7, 360, just a little bit more than a vegetable because of the brain damage. And they say, oh, well, we'll pay for the ongoing care, but for ruining her life and making you have to take care of her the rest of her life, here's a check for $500,000. Nobody wants these checks, Michelle. We want accountability so that healthcare becomes safer. And what's the one thing that any business owner knows is going to make someone change their ways? Hit their bottom line. When it starts hitting their bottom line, they're going to be having boardroom meetings really quickly to say, we have to turn this ship around because it's impacting our profits. But instead of focusing on turning the ship around and making healthcare safer. They spend millions and millions of our healthcare costs on lobbyists to go fight for laws that work against us and make where we can't hold them accountable.
And that is one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we brought up today is that first of all, when you talk about protecting profits, that is part of the accountability. You're saying we want accountability, and to them, I think that's the most important accountability, because they do care so much about profits. The other thing is there are lobbyists that are involved. This is big, 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 big money. And so I've got another video that I wanted our viewers to see, and then we're going to come back and we're going to read some viewer comments and questions for you. Okay. All right. Yes. So let's see this video real quick.
Thank you. Under Florida's free kill law, if a victim is 25 years or older, not married, and they don't have minor children, doctors get a free pass for fatal medical negligence. My older daughter, Taylor, had just turned 25 a couple of months prior to being killed by confirmed reckless medical negligence and neglect inside a $110 billion hospital corporation. None of the medical professionals who have reviewed her record can even believe it happened. It's so egregious. The hospital and doctors have had zero consequences for her death, and their medical licenses remain clear and active on the Medical Licensing Board, Department of Health website. When people hear about Florida's free kill law, the first thing they do is go to Google to fact check and make sure that it can even be real. Through that process, they see that the law states that families of free kill victims can pursue justice for economic damages. Meanwhile, non-economic damages are banned for families of free kill victims. But that is exactly how accountability is blocked. The cost to seek justice far outweighs economic damages that can be recovered for a deceased victim of medical malpractice. This law is by design. A free pass for fatal medical negligence is a free kill. When justice is blocked because accountability is financially unattainable, the system protects itself. I will never get justice for my daughter Taylor since the law was on the books at the time of her death. I'm just going to keep sharing the truth and exposing how the law really works. Follow along to learn more.
Okay, so I want you to hear some of the things that our viewers are saying. So Rita over on YouTube says this is heartbreaking. She also says this is medical murder. GL says, was your daughter an organ donor?
That is a fantastic question. Taylor was not a registered organ donor at the time that she was killed. For some reason, I had always encouraged my daughters to be an organ donor. Let me make it clear right now. I encourage nobody to be a registered organ donor. Let care be the number one priority, and their next of kin can make that decision, or their healthcare surrogate if it comes to that. So when Taylor renewed her Florida driver's license in 2022, for some reason, she told them she didn't want to re-register as an organ donor. I think it's because when you renew your license, they're rapid firing you verbal questions. And it's like, have you had a DUI? Have you had a felony? And she's just like, no. And they slide it in there. Do you want to be an organ donor? And I just think she was answering no to everything. So that being said, she was not a registered organ donor
at the time of the accident.
I'll be honest, Michelle, people can call me a conspiracy theorist, but this has consumed my entire life for the last little over 3 years since they killed her. I can't focus on anything else. I mean, my career, everything has just like been pushed aside so that I can make sure this doesn't keep happening. After learning about what goes on and all the families being pushed, because families reach out to me all the time and they're like, they just kept pushing for us to sign a do not resuscitate for my mom, because a lot of people are losing their parents to this law. It disproportionately impacts the elderly who are widowed or widowered with widower with older children or special needs. So they push these do not resuscitates. And I hate to say it, but because their focus is on profits to the extreme, nothing matters more than profits. I don't think they knew Taylor was a free kill at the time, but I think they knew that they had messed up so badly. And again, this is just my opinion, because there's nothing that can explain that 7 hours of not helping her and then sending a false cause of death. Had she survived, the economic damages would have been astronomical that hospital would have had to cover for the rest of her life. And she was only 25. Since she didn't survive, the worst case, had I been able to go after them, would have been minimal economic damages and then the non-economic damages. And I really believe that's why they're pushing the do not resuscitates. If your viewers watch a movie called Bleed Out on HBO Max, I just made contact with Steve Burrows, whose mom was in Wisconsin and went in for a simple partial hip replacement surgery. And she lost half the blood volume in her body during the surgery. The hospital falsified her record. He uncovered all of it, and all of it's documented in this beautifully done documentary. But this shows the links to which they will go. They'll spend $3 million to save $2 million. Like, they just want people to know we're invincible. So if you come after us, we're going to try to. I mean, it took him 10 years to get through that suit, and I really encourage your audience to watch that. That happened in Wisconsin. That state does have caps of $750,000. And they essentially bankrupted his mom through all of this. She ended up surviving, but she was brain damaged. Retired special education teacher. So she was a public servant for special needs her whole life for a school district. Retired. She was living her little best life on her teacher retirement. Goes in. None of this was her own fault. She just went into the hospital and trusted they were going to do this surgery. Something happened. She loses half of her blood. They falsify the record. Her son figures out all of it, takes them to court. They end up, they're carrying all these costs for 10 years. So the mom ends up on Medicaid because the hospital hasn't been found guilty yet. They're just going to keep these lawsuits going to infinity if they can. So she's now drained all of her resources because they're sending her the copays and everything for the damage done. And she ended up on Medicaid. And this is what is happening in the United States of America. These hospitals are profit and revenue machines. We are all a means to an end for them. Doctors, nurses, and patients, by the way. Doctors are sick of it. I've had so many doctors reach out who don't want to be part of the system. So medical school enrollment's way down. But essentially, it's literally money-making mills. Like, let's shuffle these people through. And ultimately, the patients are the profit. The doctors and nurses are actually a liability because it costs them money, which is why they want to hire the cheapest ones or the least experienced ones. And then when this profit machine that they're cranking people through messes up, they don't want their profits impacted. They want to show you that they are invincible. And ultimately, they're succeeding at a high level at that. And we're all funding this through Medicaid, and our federal taxes are funding their mistakes.
So Maria over on YouTube says this is negligence, scary on every level. God help us. That's so true. GL says these doctors need to lose their license, but of course they're not going to lose their license because there's no accountability. That's part of what we're talking about here in this whole situation. It's insane. Skater 9 says, so sorry for your loss. She is beautiful. Kazadu says, wow, how beautiful she was. No Nonsense Netta says, got a question. Were all Taylor's organs accounted for when the private autopsy came back?
So I did end up, I'm the type of person that I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing and trying to stay in principle in situations. And so once they declared her brain dead, I knew I was going to figure out why they didn't do the surgery to help her. Mm-hmm. But they did call in the organ donation place. Whenever they're, especially someone young and healthy and fit like Taylor. So this person who was wonderful. I mean, this was a very compassionate human being just doing her job. Mm-hmm. But it was ironic because I was at the elevator. Taylor's friends were devastated. They had their parents flying in from other states to support them because it was so devastating. And I was at the elevator. This is before they'd even officially done the brain death testing. But these families, they'd been there for over 24 hours. They dropped everything, missed work, flew in to see Taylor and be with their children. And I'm at the elevator and this nurse walks up to me while I'm speaking with these parents and thanking them for coming. And she's tapping me and she seems giddy. So she's tapping me. She's interrupting me with these people, didn't even wait or read the room. And she's tapping my shoulder and she says, I turn around and I'm like, what? And because of her demeanor, I thought maybe Taylor's condition had miraculously improved. You just never know, right? Yeah. And so I'm looking at her and I said, I'm pointing to these people I'm trying to say goodbye to. And I'm like, what is it that you need? And she's like, I need you to come here. I need you to come here. And I said, what? Has Taylor's condition improved? What do you need me to come there for? She's like, I just need you to come here. Come here, come here, come here. And I said, I'm thinking that clearly she needs me right away. So I quickly parted ways with these parents. And I'm asking her, what do you need me for? She's like, just follow me. Just follow me. So I follow her. We go back through the doors. You have to have a code to get through. And she walks me into this room and sits me down. And I have no idea, Michelle. I don't know if it's a doctor that's about to tell me that they have a little bit of, like, maybe something changed. I have no clue what is about to be said to me. And I sit down, and this poor lady had no idea that I had no idea either. So she's doing her job, wonderful human being. She actually supports this effort that I'm doing. But she pulls out an iPad and she starts showing me videos about organ donation. Like, Taylor has not even been declared brain dead yet. I don't know, that this is the next thing on the agenda. And I was so dumbfounded, but I just kept my bearings. And I just said, I'm going to have to stop you. I will not be having this conversation with you right now. And I just got up and left. I was just trying to process what just happened. So,
wow, that's a lot to take in right there.
It's a lot. Wow. And I did ultimately end up signing organ donation consent. I thought about it. I prayed about it. And I thought, nothing is going to bring, once I knew she was brain dead, I said, what is the best possible decision I can make under these circumstances? And I thought, if, I didn't want the organs to not be able to help somebody at that point, knowing what I knew at the time. So I went ahead and signed, after they declared her brain dead, a couple of hours later, which was, I think, the next day, I signed organ donation consent. And 7 of Taylor's organs did save lives. So she saved 7 lives. Her heart was so badly damaged, though, I was told. Now, Taylor was very fit and healthy when they killed her, but I was told her heart had to go to a 60-year-old woman in South Carolina, because now I know, because when you let someone bleed to that extent, that second CT image showed her heart had collapsed and her organs were failing, and that she had hypoxic brain damage from the bleed out. And that's when they just let her continue bleeding for 7 more hours.
Okay. Colette said, where in Florida did this happen?
This happened in the little suburb of Orlando where Disney World is. It's called Kissimmee, Florida. So it's a suburb of Orlando.
All right. Marguerite, for me, says the story has me weeping. KM Sunshine said, this is such a tragic story. I can't imagine losing my daughter. Kazadu said, wow, would not let her see her daughter. Cindy would have seen the truth from the beginning. I think that's possibly why they didn't want your daughter being transferred, because somebody would realize what was really going on. They had to keep her there so that no other hospital or no other medical providers could even see what was really going on.
Well, and at that point, Michelle, there's some falsification in the medical record. I'll never know, because I will never have them in a courtroom answering questions.
Yeah.
But she was pronounced brain dead on March 22nd, 2023 at 5:35 p.m. Before 9 p.m. that evening, I had signed organ donation consent. There is a note. Oh, and I was also told by this wonderful lady from the organ donation company who was doing a wonderful job. I was told, because I'd signed, and then I went back in to be with Taylor, and we were all saying last goodbyes because we knew she was going to be transferred to another hospital where they do the organ procurement. They don't do it at that hospital. So we're having our moment and just really grieving and trying to relive some happy memories. And then the lady from the organ donation company came in and she said, the transport's on its way. The ambulance is going to come and transport Taylor to the Advent Health in Orlando that does the procurement. And Michelle, by this point, I had been there for 5 full days. I hadn't slept in my own bed. I clearly wasn't in my right mind when I was packing, so I didn't even have the appropriate stuff for a 5-day stay.
Sure.
So now that I knew I'd already signed for consent, I'd spent some time with Taylor. I knew we'd be able to spend more time with her because we were going to do an honor walk at the next hospital. And I left and went back to Jacksonville. Okay, but there is a note in her record. I went back to Jacksonville to sleep in my own bed for a night, repack a suitcase, and then head back down. Which then all of a sudden the organ donation company reaches out, not all of a sudden, but the next day, and she says, we're actually going to have the honor walk a day later, but she didn't know why. She's not involved. They keep it very separate between the organ donation part and what the hospital's doing. And she said, I don't know, but I just wanted to make sure you know the honor walk's been postponed by a day. And I said, okay, well, there's a note in her medical record that says, family has asked for patient to be kept overnight, undecided about organ donation, and they have more family coming to visit. Michelle, we had all left that hospital. We thought the ambulance was on the way to take her to the other hospital. I don't know if that note was so that this massive multi-billion-dollar hospital corporation could charge for an extra 24-hour ICU stay, because like apparently after they pass midnight, they get to charge for another day. Or to your point, I don't know if they had to clean up the evidence, because clearly the other hospital was going to see. Mm-hmm.
This is insane. Tina says, this is absolutely crazy. My 20-year-old daughter is still in Florida, and I'm trying so hard to get her to leave. Kazadu says, this sounds like first-degree murder. No nonsense. Netta says, brain dead is not what they say it is. Much like everything else that they tell us, they're saying now that there's no such thing as brain dead. I don't know if you've heard about all that.
I've heard of it, yes.
Dr. Margaret and I talked about it here on the show quite a few months ago. But Pierre's mom once says, this is so terrible and we have no rights anymore. I think that at the end of the day, it's going to be difficult to really hold anybody's feet to the fire because of laws like this that, it's insane. Dardamia says, I have a young cousin who is right now going through this with swelling and bleeding of the brain.
Oh.
Yeah. And so do you have any advice for them? Anything you want to say?
Is the person in Florida? I guess that doesn't matter, but ultimately I forgot the nurse's name that did this I do not consent form.
It's Laura Bartlett.
Laura Bartlett. Yeah. I wish I had known of Laura, because I was on the Dr. Margaret show and I was able to meet Laura, and she has a form called I do not consent.
Yep.
And I recommend that this family, now that if they're having the brain bleed though, they need to see if the healthcare surrogate or whoever's the next of kin per state law can do this I do not consent form, and they need to potentially get them transferred to another hospital. And Laura Bartlett can also help with that, with the hospital hostage hotline. I'm so sorry that they're in that situation.
It's
the mom who said she has a 20-year-old in Florida. One thing I want to interject here is because a lot of people are like, oh, well, thank gosh I'm married, or thank goodness my kids are still minors. It does not matter. Nobody knows what hospital this happened in exactly. I mean, I have shared it online. They can come at me. You've killed my child. Come at me with a lawsuit and see what happens. You've taken the most important thing from me.
Well,
so
the facts are the facts. And
the facts are the facts. Yes, ma'am. And I have shared only facts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That wherever it happened is wherever it happened, and you're entitled to your own opinions as well. Mm-hmm. So Tall Madge Mom says, my heart breaks for you. May God bless your family, as this is so sad. NH Mama says that doctor may have barely passed medical boards. Have you heard about the people that have medical licensed doctor certificates on the wall, and come to find out they paid for them and they really never went to medical school? Have you heard about that, Cindy? That's coming out.
I've heard of that. Yes, I have. And it's also Florida's a second chance state. I've been told if doctors if they get banned in another state, they know they can just go down to Florida and practice. It's the second chance state. But this law doesn't just impact free kill. If you look at the Florida census data and you look at the population in Florida that's married or has minor children, about 50% of the people in Florida now fall into this category, but the doctors continue to practice. So they don't get a consequence. The Florida Department of Health closes approximately 97% of complaints received. That is per their own data. So even though I have a changed death certificate and I have a sworn affidavit from a well-credentialed Florida physician outlining that reckless negligence and neglect killed Taylor, and it's undeniable. And I wrote the complaints the best I could. They closed my complaints saying there was no probable cause to believe medical malpractice occurred. There's going to be a news story I'll be sharing across my social platforms, and I'd love to connect you with this family. Their dad was the victim of horrific negligence to the point his cause of death is homicide. They dotted every I and crossed every T on their complaints to the Department of Health because the dad is a free kill. So they were like, we have to have some form of accountability. They can't continue to get away with this. Yeah. They closed their complaints. The Florida Department of Health is not a reliable form of accountability, nor were they ever meant, or any Department of Health in any state ever meant to replace the civil justice system. Our Constitution says we have the right to due process, equal protection, and access to the courts.
That's right. That's right. And that is exactly what's not happening. Okay, I want to back up to something I hadn't thought of before, and I want to mention this. So you're saying that Florida is a second chance state. Now, y'all follow me here. So, okay, but then you got no accountability happening. And so it's not like you keep messing up and you're going to be done. Your medical license is going to go away. No, second chance. Just they got the worst of the worst doctors down there getting a second chance, but second chance doesn't ever like have any accountability. So guess what? You're going to continue to have the worst of the worst down in Florida. This is insane, Cindy.
The worst of the worst. And let me tell you, even when I've learned that the laws in Florida are meant to do nothing but protect the negligent and their profits and protect insurance company profits. There is a law on the books in Florida called the 3 strikes law. And what the law says is that if anyone licensed by the Florida Medical Board, or even if it's a nurse, anyone who has any type of healthcare license issued through the Florida Department of Health, if they have 3 incidents of medical malpractice, this law says 3 strikes and you're out, right? Yeah. Here's the kicker. If they settle outside of court, it does not count as a strike. So I'm sure your viewers may have heard of Dr. Shagnovsky in the Florida Panhandle, who removed the gentleman's liver instead of his spleen. And these poor folks were from Alabama. They didn't even want to stay in Florida and have the procedure done, but the doctor strong-armed them into doing it, told them they'd have to sign a hold harmless. If you leave, you could die, all this stuff. And so Mr. Bryan stays, and this doctor removes his liver instead of his spleen, and he bleeds out on the operating table. Now, had he not been married, he would have been a free kill. But what people don't realize is Dr. Shagnovsky had removed a wrong body part a year prior and killed a 70-year-old woman, and he was still practicing with a clear active license until a month after. It was over a month after he killed Mr. Bryan, and that hit the national news. And when it hit the national news and all eyes were on the state of Florida, that is when the Department of Health suspended his license. But after killing 2 patients in 2 years by removing a wrong body part, they didn't even immediately suspend his license a second time. They are not a reliable form of accountability. And these doctors who settle cases outside of court, you have to search the Florida Department of Insurance regulation website to see a doctor's record. Most doctors in Florida have a clear active license, even if they've settled numerous cases outside of court, because it just doesn't count. The neurosurgeon has 5 cases now that he's settled outside of court. You can only see that on the Florida Department of Health website, the Office of Insurance Regulation website. His license with Department of Health, clear and active.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. Grammy says the owner of the salon that I work at, her father was killed at a hospital in Florida in 2021. He went in with swollen legs, and they put him on a respirator, gave him remdesivir, supposedly amputated his foot, and he was dead in 2 weeks. They said, if you allow us to put COVID on his death certificate, we'll give you $9,000.
Wow.
Which we know that was happening left and right at hospitals all over the place, and putting fraudulent. stuff down. I have a realtor friend of mine, her husband, during the whole, slowing of the spread, he's in the garage, he falls, hits the back of his head, he dies. Okay. From that fall, they put COVID down. She had to fight to get it removed, and it took months for her to stay at it, and finally then got an attorney and finally got it changed. But obviously, we know what the motivator here was. It was money. Taco Ride said most doctors today are employed by these hospitals rather than private practice to avoid the admin duties, expenses, and do what they are told to do to stay employed. That's so true. I think a lot of this goes back to Obamacare.
It does.
A lot of this stuff goes back to Obamacare, and what happened during the COVID times and all of that was all set up for it to succeed their way and go their way, where we had no recourse, we had no say, we were ignored. It didn't matter because everything was lined up, and it all started. What I ended up finding out in my research was that everything was set up for success for that time frame, and it went all the way back to Obamacare. And that was, and what happened is, if you would have had a lot of mom and pop, Taco Ride brings up something very important here, because she's saying most doctors today are employed by hospitals. What she's saying is, we used to have small town mom and pop little doctor's offices you walked into. And then also you had practices even in big towns, big cities, in Nashville, it wasn't anything for you to see somebody who, maybe there were a couple of doctors that owned a practice together.
Yes.
Even. And so, but that doesn't happen anymore. And they've
because
been
of Obamacare, it made it illegal for there to be. So here's the deal. If you look up the Doctors Company, which one of the main lobbyists I'm always up against, he has massive ownership. He's a lobbyist for the Doctors Company. This is a medical malpractice insurance company. And it's actually physician owned. If you look up the structure of it, they pay in their medical malpractice premiums to the Doctors Company. And they end up, if their claims stay down, the better their claim payout is, they end up getting dividends. It ends up being a retirement savings for them as well. But physicians, because of Obamacare, and I just believe lobbyists are behind all this. I don't care. Sure. I don't think this is a partisan issue. I think the lobbyists are running the show through whoever we think is running it. But the Obamacare said that physicians cannot do what they're doing with the Doctors Company, which is a med mal insurance company. They can no longer, it's getting to the point they can no longer not be an employee. It made it impossible for physicians to be able to make a business out of their profession that they went into because they have a passion for helping people. Most doctors out there are very, very good. It's just that these laws of the bad ones continue to practice without consequence.
Yeah.
And these
look
physicians,
what they did to Dr. Margaret. Dr. Margaret had her own facility, her own business. And now it wasn't, what was it? It was like physical care, like physical something another. But what she did was she pivoted when COVID happened, and she started helping those clients of hers that were already patients. I guess you'd call them patients. So her patients. And so what she did was they're calling her going, Dr. Margaret, what do I do? They were used to seeing her for a different reason, but she pivoted her practice because she was able to. She owned that practice. And she was able to help countless with getting ivermectin and all of the help that they needed. I'm sure she saved many lives. But the state of California went after her. And, guys with guns showed up at her office, and they went after her. And here she was with a perfect record. And, to know her, it wouldn't surprise you. And so, they came after her. And it was because she wasn't in line with what the program was, which was no ivermectin, no mebendazole, and everybody's going to get remdesivir and be put on a ventilator and never see the light of day again. Okay. But so she wasn't, but what happens is when you have your own practice and you're not an employee, then what happens is you can't be controlled unless like what happened to her, where you have somebody like a medical board, or you have the state coming in and saying, look at you, you're not, you're doing this. And I had another doctor who said they can, we know that there's medical medications that get prescribed, and they call it off label. And you can have everybody. There are certain medications that are widely prescribed off label. Okay. It's like common every day, every doctor's doing it. But I had a doctor say to me, he said, they can come after a doctor anytime they want to, because they can go through a file and they go, wait a minute, what's this right here? You prescribe such and so. It's not approved for that, even though literally millions of doctors do it every day and they know it, but they can get you on stuff like that. And he said,
they don't want you as their competition. That's the thing. They're trying to wipe out their competition. There's a doctor in the Florida Panhandle, Dr. Joel Rudman, and he's owned a private practice for many years. And he actually came to Tallahassee and spoke in front of the legislature and said, because they say this law exists to keep medical malpractice premiums affordable, and that's the biggest dupe of all time. It's because they can profit off of wrongful death and the insurers can dodge claims. But he said, this is wrong. Medical malpractice premiums are not even on the top 10 of, what I'm thinking about for my practice. And he's now talking about how this hospital that killed Taylor is opening up ER in a boxes all over the state of Florida because they can charge emergency room prices. And I really hope this will save the lives of some of your viewers, because it's not just happening in Florida. These big revenue-driven hospitals are opening up emergency room in a boxes. And I'm sure all of y'all have seen them. And it's just a standalone emergency room. But if you go to that emergency room and you have a true emergency where you need to be rushed immediately into surgery, the time it takes for you to get from that ER in a box to the actual real emergency room connected to a hospital can mean the difference between your life and death. But these ER in a boxes get to charge the same prices as a real emergency room. So it's a big profit center. I would encourage everyone to boycott them. And if you need and in fact, Dr. Redmond said this, he said, if you need regular routine care, go to your PCP. Come see me if I'm your PCP, go to your PCP. If you need urgent care, like you just can't wait to get in for an appointment, go to an urgent care clinic. But if you need emergency care, go to an emergency room attached to a hospital. It will mean the difference between life and death for some.
That's insane. All right. Bonnie says, I'm so sorry for you. May God be with you and your daughter, your other daughter, and that she's praying for you. Tina says, the article that I read said this law has been on the books for 40 years. That long? Wow.
1990.
Right. Let's talk about this. So I want to pivot to the lawmakers. And so you have really been focusing on trying to fix it to where some real change happens so that they could never do this to another family. And so obviously, surely you've talked with some lawmakers and reached out to lawmakers. So share what do lawmakers say? What's DeSantis saying? I mean, he's the governor. So he talks big and never gets anything done. So what's he say?
Well, so going back to when I found out this law was a thing and I really verified, because at first you don't believe it and you end up calling ridiculous amounts of attorneys. And then you realize there's no angle, there's no loophole, because that's what everyone will tell you. No, you've got to be able to find a loophole. There are no loopholes. You are not going to hold them accountable. And 97% of the time, the Department of Health is going to close your complaint. So they're just going to get off free. They're going to get a total free pass. But when I learned that it had passed in 1990, I mean, Taylor was born in a Florida hospital on New Year's Eve in 1997. How have I raised my child here in the state of Florida? She was born in a hospital. She died in a Florida hospital. And I had never knew we had a law only in Florida that protects doctors and gives them a free pass. Yeah. I just knew I was going to set out on a mission to end the law because it's wrong. There's no justification for it. And especially if you're pro-life, I want anyone to help me with this cognitive dissonance. How do you claim to be pro-life and then you're also pro-free kill? Those two things do not go together. So I said, this is wrong. It's causing people to get free passes. The doctors are not being held accountable in any meaningful way at all. Even if the Department of Health finds them guilty, which is 3% of the time, it's usually because they had access to the courts and the family turns over all the findings from a massive court trial, which they won. I mean, how does the Department of Health close that, right? But those are typically the 3% they're going to find fault with. The max fine they can impose as a $10,000 fine to the doctor, and they'll usually have them do some continuing education credit. And they cannot produce a judgment saying you're also going to pay back the health insurer because you're not going to hit the jackpot for killing patients through negligence. So I said, this is wrong. Googled it. And you see a lot of things back then would pop up from law firms that had written blogs about it and whatnot. And there were a couple of news stories, but I first wanted to raise mass awareness. So I would spend hours. There were days I would not even roll out of bed. I would just open up my laptop in my pajamas. And the next thing you know, 12 to 16 hours have gone by. I haven't even eaten. And I'm just emailing every news reporter. I'm trying to put a catchy subject line because I want people to at least know the law exists. It's one thing to know a law exists and that this can happen. It's another thing in the darkest time in your life, after you've just faced a major tragedy and figured out what happened, to be told there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, be blindsided.
Insane. So these reporters start reaching back out, a good handful of them, saying, how have I reported for 2 decades in Florida and I've never heard of this law? So they started coming over, doing news interviews, and it started getting the word out. And it was also a way to shed light on Florida's dirty little secret, because I've learned that there's so much that goes on, and unless you sit in Tallahassee for entire legislative sessions, as me and other families have, you don't really know what they're up to, right? Like a lot of people think that we get to vote on everything that passes. That's only if it ends up being a ballot amendment. As long as the House and Senate file a bill and both chambers pass that bill and the governor lets it go into law, we have no say. So I started getting the news reporters involved in 2024. For the first time in 35 years, the Senate decided, it was Senator Clay Yarborough in Nassau County, Jacksonville area, said, I will file a bill, but we have to have compromise. He says, I believe every life has value. I don't think lives should be valued differently. I don't think anyone is above the law. But for us to get this through, we're going to have to come to some type of compromise, because they've all been brainwashed that the compromise is caps, which would essentially accomplish the same thing, but it would also hurt people that survived the negligence, not just people that died from it. So he filed a bill in 2024, first time in 35 years the Senate has filed a bill, and he had caps of $500,000 on it. So I started calling news reporters. Again, I said, there was a lot of confusion. A lot of people don't understand why caps are bad. The hospitals and insurance companies have spent millions on propaganda to brainwash the public to think that this is a good thing because it's going to keep your healthcare costs down, right? No, it's not. It's going to protect their profits, and we're all going to end up funding their mistakes or Medicaid. But he did that bill, and it passed the first Senate committee. And I just called the reporters, and it was kind of like a caps war in 2024. Some families agreed to it. They're like, at least then everyone will be treated the same. And I won't have to think that my loved one was a free kill. But at the end of the day, those caps still block justice. It all boils down to how much are the caps? How much is this going to cost? And it doesn't mean that every family can get help. It all depends on how horrific were your economic damages, the stuff that we can tabulate, since the non-economic is capped. Thankfully, because the news reporters they were in Tallahassee airing every House and Senate committee hearing after that Senate bill passed with 500,000 caps, because I couldn't live with myself if I knew that my fight and everything I've poured into this is now going to hurt people on an even larger scale.
Sure.
Because caps would apply to everybody. So thankfully, he let the bill die after it passed the first Senate committee. 2025 rolls around. Me and other families, now we're realizing, because the news is out there, so now people are contacting us. They killed my mom, they killed my dad, they killed my son, they killed my daughter. They have a place to go now. It's not like we're all just random people and there's no way for us to connect. They're Googling it, they're seeing the news stories, and we're realizing this is rampant. It's rampant. I get contacted a couple of times a day now by people letting me know that this has happened. So in 2025, we begin the fight again, and the House filed a clean bill, meaning no caps, no hoodwink. We're going to give you, get rid of this law, but we're going to make sure we harm everyone to protect profits on a larger scale. The House passes a clean repeal. me and other advocates are there to speak at every House committee, every single committee meeting, because it had to go through 3 different committee hearings. The news reporters are there reporting on it. It passes for the first time. I'm going to cry because we were so happy. Like, we were crying, we were cheering. It was like, we got this past the Florida House, knowing, and everyone watching should know this, that we will never have justice. We're not fighting this because we're ever going to have justice. The bill in 2025 said that free kill would be repealed effective July 1st, 2025. And if your family member was a victim prior to that, you're not part of that club.
Sure.
It would only be the people going forward. So we're all there for the House floor hearing, and history was made when the entire Florida House passes this bill to end this evil law. And we're celebrating, and it's all over the news. And then the Senate committee hearings begin, and we think, here's where it's going to get tough, because the lobbies, there's 120 House reps, and their job really is to represent the people. They get to file 7 bills each every year, or every session in Florida. And they truly do. Those 7 bills, they don't always file 7, but they just listen to the people they represent, and then they file bills. And then you look at the Senate, and this is 40 senators in the state of Florida. 40. So they represent much larger areas, and they have a job not just to represent the people, but to make sure that they find the balance between representing the people and passing good policy. They can't pass something if it's not going to be for the greater good of all Floridians, even if a lot of people want it. So they have to find that balance, and we're thinking, here it goes, because the lobbies spend millions and millions and millions of dollars in Florida to make sure that the people they want to get in the key seats, the governor, the Senate president, the chairs of Senate committees, that's who makes it onto the ballot that we get to vote for, right? So people say, oh, you need to go vote. In a world where people were making the ballot in a legitimate way because they didn't have millions and millions of dollars funding them, that may work. But people need to understand that by the time you go to the poll and vote for certain key positions, the person you get to vote on is who the lobbyists have spent millions to make sure are on that ballot for you to circle in. Quite frankly, Florida is heavily Republican. Typically, people are going to go in and they're just going to start voting for the candidates with the R by their name, right? So the lobbyists make sure that they control the key legislators. So we knew we had our job cut out for us. We thought the public pressure and the news media was going to be what, sunlight's the best disinfectant. And we thought they're not going to be able to do what they're used to doing if all eyes are on them. So the bill gets filed in the Senate. It's a clean bill. It has no caps on it. It gets signed to 3 Senate committees that it's required to go through and be voted on. It goes through Senate Judiciary. I'll never forget, we were all bawling. Like, we all went up and gave our testimony, and the Senate Judiciary voted on this clean repeal, and it passed. And we were just like, that was the miracle of all miracles for it to get through one Senate committee. And then the next committee comes up, and it's the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services. And we're all there, and we're giving our testimony. And it's like almost like a debate, because you're going up and you're telling the legislators why the law needs to end. And then the lobbies, there's tons of lobbyists there. And they're going up telling you, oh, doctors will leave the state. We won't have access to care, which, by the way, that's not the access to care any of us seek, if that's the kind of care they're giving us access to with these laws. But they're just giving the same narrative that's been disproven, but that's been around for 40 years to keep the law on the books, almost 40 years. And then we go up and we're saying why it's wrong and trying to negate what they're saying. And it passes the second committee. And we're like, you've got to be kidding me. It only has one more committee to go through. So it goes to the Senate Rules Committee. This is the largest Senate committee. And it ends up passing that committee as well. And it was a glorious day, because we're like, wow, this is going to the Senate floor for a full floor vote. So to your point of talking with legislators, these lobbyists have an open door. They're in Tallahassee. These poor families, they're taking time off of work. They're spending their own money to go be in Tallahassee just because they don't want other families to live this nightmare we've lived. We're not getting paid for this. We're losing money. This has cost me a fortune.
Sure.
But you can't put a price on human lives and accountability. So it's worth it. But, so we're all, and some families could come for some, and then they're like, I can't get the next day off of work. so we're just all doing our best to have some representation. Meanwhile, we're across the row from lobbyists being paid millions of dollars. 2025 was a record-breaking year for lobbyists in Florida. This had a lot to do with it. But it passes the Rules Committee, and then it's going to the Senate floor. And we are just, wow. So the Senate floor hearing is scheduled for this bill that has passed all 3 committees clean with no caps. The bill gets to the Senate floor. Many of us had driven in. I mean, people did arrange for work because this was going to be a miracle. Huge. And we're in the Senate chamber, and Senator Clay Yarborough files an 11th hour caps amendment on the floor of the Senate to add caps. It had already passed every committee clean. It makes it to the Senate floor, and he files an amendment to add caps to the bill. Miraculously, the caps amendment failed. More people voted against the caps than for them. The caps amendment failed. He then said, I believe it's the right thing to do to let the bill, because he didn't even have to, if what they really wanted was caps, Senator Yarborough could have said, we're just going to let the bill die at this point. People have no idea how much control those in certain seats have. But Senator Yarborough said, I believe it's the right thing to do to let this move on for a full floor vote. And then if it passes, we're going to send it on to the governor. So the caps amendment failed. A vote is a vote. It doesn't matter if you like the vote count, right? Like you vote for a reason.
That's right.
And the caps amendment failed. And then 33 of 37 senators on the floor of the Senate that day voted for the law to be gone. 33 of 37. So all total, the Florida legislature, 93% of the Florida legislature voted in favor of ending this law with overwhelming bipartisan support. Almost immediately, the governor announced to news press the bill would be dead on arrival. He held a public veto press conference. I mean, it wasn't right away that he held it. Me and other families, we're trying to get news reporters to have all eyes on him. We have people writing letters. He received over 7,000 letters begging him not to veto the bill. In the meantime, we are watching the lobbyists walk in and out of his office like they own.
We're talking about DeSantis. Governor Ron DeSantis. We're at the Capitol like nonstop at the expense of everything else in our lives. We're watching lobbyists walk in and out of his office like they own the place. Not one person can get a meeting with him. I've been begging. I've called. I've sent it through the one site online they tell you to send it to. I've emailed it. I've emailed Casey DeSantis. I've pleaded for a meeting. We've all been ignored. We will watch lobbyists walk in and out of his office like they own the place. We started getting news pressure on them. We started having people send letters because we're taught to believe these people represent us, right? Like people voted for him. He represents us. Well, fast forward a little bit. We gave it our best shot to make sure he knew what the will of the people was. The legislature had already spoken, 93% with overwhelming bipartisan support. Try to get Democrats and Republicans in Florida to agree on anything. It was a miracle we had overwhelming bipartisan support. May 29th, 2025, he holds a public veto press conference at a hospital with these powerful lobbyists present, and he vetoes the bill. And I actually have on my social media that in 2026, the House overwhelmingly passed a bill to end it again. DeSantis, in his veto press conference, said recycled lobbyist statements as the reasons for his veto, and we've already disproven all of those. So in one of the House hearings, I stand up and I'm very cut and dry about what happened to Taylor, that it's proven negligence, that they've had no consequences, that the Department of Health did nothing. It proves that they're failing all of us and that these protections perpetuate more harm. And I then go through in front of the House on the mic, so it's on record, and I negate every reason for his veto with fact. So the bill in 2026 passes the full House again, overwhelming support from both sides of the aisle. I mean, Democrats and Republicans want this law gone. Senator Aaron Grahl files a bill in the Senate to get rid of the law. 8 senators
bipartisan senators, there were Democrats and Republicans, smacked their name as co-sponsor on this bill, saying, we want to defend this bill. We will fight for this to the bitter end in committees and on the Senate floor for a clean repeal of the law, not with caps. 8 senators backed their name on it. The Senate would not even allow the bill to be heard or voted on. It died.
Too risky.
Too risky. There's a lot of political bullying happening in Tallahassee from what I'm told. I'm told he will make promises, and if you do what he wants you to do, you'll get some type of reward, some type of, a little
Is this DeSantis you're referring to?
Mm-hmm. Or he will make threats, and I'm told he will follow through on his threats. So now we have laws being passed because we have executive overreach in Florida, not because the House and Senate are truly representing the people. In fact, senators shamelessly said when I was calling them, I spent from January through March of this year, nonstop, it consumed me, calling, emailing senators, because you have to constantly be trying to offset what the lobbies are doing and trying to brainwash them. And I just begged them, please at least let it be heard and voted on. And more than one said, the governor has not changed his position on that bill. We're not going to let the bill be heard.
Goodness, Cindy. Well, we know now where DeSantis stands on this, and I wanted to make sure that we got that covered in today's show. Cindy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Taylor's death. I think it's interesting. When I've heard you say, "I'm not going to get justice," but you still fight, and what happened to her has happened, but you still fight trying to make sure that it doesn't happen to other families. And I have to say it's quite admirable. And I just appreciate you coming on today and sharing about these kinds of things that are going on, not just in the state of Florida, but really all over. And we have to be aware of it so we can protect ourselves and our loved ones. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So be sure to keep her in your prayers. And you see how far it can go through the House and the Senate of Florida, and then the governor just squashes it. So, we've said it here on the show many times that Ron DeSantis talks a big game, but something I've ended up noticing is that nothing ever gets done. And so it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate what they're doing to these survivors. And I'm sure there are plenty other kinds of things they're doing. Like she said, if you don't get in line, there's threats, and he follows through on those threats. Don't know what that means exactly, but I wouldn't be surprised. I hope that you've, I hate to say enjoyed today's show, because it's just been such an eye-opening story, and horrific what happened to her daughter and what they've continued to do. But I think that at the end of the day, we've got to be aware so that we can then take the proper steps to be able to protect ourselves and our family. I want to remind you that we've got a documentary tomorrow, and then another one on Thursday. Tomorrow is the light bulb conspiracy. This is about the planned obsolescence. And so if you're not familiar with this, you've got to watch this documentary. It is so good. And then the Thursdays, producer Ron, cognitive liberty, neuroweapons, and the fight for brain privacy. This is jaw-dropping, shocking information. You want to make sure that you watch this as well. So that'll be on Thursday. And then I'll be here Friday at our regular time, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. And so we'll see you right here next time on The Michelle Moore Show.
Ever read the ingredients on your everyday products and think, wait, is this shampoo or a science experiment? If your lotion needs a translator, a lab coat, and a warning label, it might be time for a change. Godly Granny products are made with purpose, love, and ingredients you can actually recognize. No mystery chemicals, no toxins, just clean, simple goodness. The way Granny would have wanted. Because your skincare shouldn't require a chemistry degree. From shampoo, lotion, skincare, and all natural health remedies, Godly Granny has everything your family needs. It's no wonder we have over 1,200 5-star reviews from our amazing customers to prove it. Join the families just like yours who've switched to Godly Granny. Visit godlygranny.com and sign up for our emails to receive a special discount code for 10% off your first order, plus exclusive updates and information on newly released products.
Hi, I'm Linda Bamber Olson, the inventor of the Wave Watch, the world's first frequency therapy watch. It features over 1,100 targeted frequencies combined into 150 playlists for ease of use. These sounds are acoustical and they move through your body, through your skin and your bones. You don't necessarily have to hear it. As each frequency goes through, it can be realigning, revitalizing, reconnecting, and even rebalancing your body all the way to the cellular level. So that's why we have so many testimonies for aches, ADD and ADHD, allergies, colds and flu, dental, emotions, headaches, joints, kidney stones, nerves, organs, skin health, swelling, tremors, vagus nerve, and so many more. Use this code for $100 off when you purchase the Wave Watch. Thanks for learning about frequencies, using them, and supporting the Wave Watch.
Universal Coin and Bullion is my partner for gold, silver, rare coins, and precious metal IRAs. For over 30 years, they've helped more than 500,000 customers and completed over $2.6 billion in precious metals transactions. They're offering callers 2 1-ounce American Silver Eagles and a 1/10 ounce American Gold Eagle at actual dealer cost. Call Universal Coin and Bullion today.
For Michelle's social media links, go to michellemooreshow.com.